This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is Bobby Conte, who stars on Broadway in Company, a great and talented actor. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Lisante, and actor and singer Bobby Conte joins me now. Bobby is currently playing the role of PJ in the Broadway revival of Company. He made his Broadway debut originating the role of Calogero in A Bronx Tale, directed by Robert De Niro and Jerry Zaks. And some of his other theater credits include My Fair Lady, Starting Here, Starting Now, and Last Days of Summer. Bobby is a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, and he trained in London at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Bobby's debut album, released last year, is called Along the Way, based on a solo cabaret he does around the country. Bobby's here with us today to talk about being back on Broadway and what he says is his Sondheim dream role. He talks about his life, his family, the values that sustain him. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking the wonderful actor and singer, Bobby Conte. Before we go to our interview with Bobby, let's listen to him singing Sondheim's Another 100 People from Company.
Another 100 people just got off of the train and came up to the ground, while another 100 people just got off of the bus and are looking around at another 100 people who got off of the plane and are looking at us who got off of the train and the plane and the bus maybe yesterday. It's a city of strangers, some come to work, some to play. A city of strangers, some come to stare, some to stay. And every day, the ones who stay can find each other in the crowded streets and the guarded parks, by the rusty fountains and the dusty trees with the battered bars. And they walk together past the poster walls with the crude remarks. And they meet at parties with the friends of friends who they never know. Will you pick me up or do I meet you there or shall we let it go? Did you get my message? Cause I looked in vain. Can we see each other Tuesday if it doesn't rain? Look, I'll message you tomorrow or I'll call you and explain. And another 100 people just got off of the train. Another 100 people just got off of the train and came up to the ground, while another 100 people just got off of the bus.
Bobby Conte, thanks for coming on Personally Speaking. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. I'm Msgr Jim, delighted to have you on the show. We've had a lot of people from Company on. We had Matt Doyle, we had Itai, is that how you say, Itai Benson?
Itai, yes.
And of course, we had Christopher Sieber a bunch of times, but wonderful cast. And now, Bobby Conte, another great member of the cast. Bobby, you have a great quote, which I want to share with our viewers and listeners, and I loved it. You said, I am just a musical theater nerd. I was a nerd in high school, and I think I was too in college and in high school with all the college plays and high school plays. But for most of us, acting and musicals and all that in high school and college is an avocation, something we do for a while. When did you know it was no longer just an avocation, but it was actually your primary vocation, the thing you do in life?
I've always had a passion for it. No one in my family is an artist, even though they're incredibly cultured and incredibly supportive of me going down this path. Everyone else is in the sciences or in the political world. But so I guess in a way, I think I've always known, because how I was raised was I was raised with the necessity to have passion instilled in every aspect of my life. And as long as you follow down that path, then you lead a life being in service of something bigger than yourself. So once I clued into that passion of performance and storytelling and singing and artistry quickly, I don't think I've ever given it up. There was a parallel path I could have gone down to be a tennis player at a different point in my life. There was in middle school and high school, I would wake up before school and have a tennis lesson before I would be in classes, then go to a full day of school, and then go back to the tennis court and continue playing. Or I'd go have a voice lesson, or I'd go be in rehearsal, and every month I'd be in some USTA youth tennis tournament. And around 13, I had to have a talk with my mother and some of my coaches and say, you need to sort of choose one path to go down more seriously, because you're going to overextend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I had a voice teacher who was in some ways a surrogate father figure, who was very supportive and saying, if you really devote yourself, you can make a life doing this. And I think I maybe went down the path as an artist in that way because I had that support system and that person in my ear saying you can do this. And maybe if I had that in a more focal point in tennis, maybe I would have gone down that path at that moment. But so maybe it was 13, 14 to answer your question of when that decision was made. But you could I could say another answer that that decision was made when I was 3 years old. Or you could say that decision has yet to have been made because I was for so long, I was only going off what people's outward perception of me was to lead me down whatever path. I was going, well, people are telling me I'm good at this, so I guess I'll do this. And that's very different than having an inner feeling of knowing this is what I'm meant to do. And this is, regardless of what response I may have from an outside world, I know internally this is what I need to continue doing.
You know, Bobby, most parents that I deal with obviously want their children to be fulfilled, but they're also very big on practical stuff. I want there to be a regular paycheck. I want a pension. I want a health insurance. Did you find from your parents that they had any spirit of worry about the arts is a magnificent thing, Bobby, but it's not steady?
I think any parent, I imagine, is going to feel that. You know, my grandparents who live on Long Island, they were the first people I lived with when I moved to the city, out of college with no money. They came from aspirational lower middle class families. My grandfather's from Queens. My grandmother was from the Bronx. And they really lifted themselves up and out, and I think wanted to be able to give their children and their grandchildren opportunities that they maybe didn't have in their given circumstances when they were born. So if they had a grandchild that said, I have a proclivity and a passion for singing, they're going to go, yes, please follow that and instill it. Of course, they want me to have security in life and have a steady paycheck, but it was sort of the assumption, not the assumption, it's the faith, the generosity of spirit, the familial love of knowing that if someone has a passion for what they do and a strong work ethic and a lack of complacency in how they go about daily life, that something is going to really turn up. And I'm very grateful for that faith, and I'm able to show that to them often as I've been able to have some luck in my career. But then I'm constantly talking with them and going, you know, this is for the moment. I luckily, we have this job and company for, knock on wood, for a year, maybe longer. Who knows what's going to happen with this pandemic? And then you try to make it again. You never make it,
Right.
And suddenly you're set in stone in the arts world. There's no there's no way of life where you will change employers as much as you do in the live arts. Some people could be an accountant and work at the same company and see the same people every day for 30, 40 years. And that is not the case in the arts, which is the beauty of it, is that it's always ephemeral. It's always changing, but therefore it's riskier, but it's a life far more well-lived. And I think my parents and my grandparents would hope that for me, is that I have a life very fully lived.
He's way before your time, Bobby, but years ago I was in a regular letter writing relationship with an actor named Paul Scofield, who had won the Oscar for A Man for All Seasons in 1966. I wanted them to come to America from England and talk about St. Thomas More and about A Man for All Seasons. And he would regularly say to me, Jim, I'm as good as the words given to me by the playwright. On my own, I'm not the most articulate guy, and I don't know what I would say. And I mention that because aside from how well you do with other people's words, just listening to you these past few moments, you have a gift for conversation, a gift for being highly articulate. Is that from mom or dad, or is that just a unique gift to you?
I would hope it's from my parents and from my grandparents as well. Everyone in my family is far more intelligent and literate than I am. I think I would. It's what was instilled is that whatever you choose to do in life, you better be articulate and literate about said field. And when my mother and my sisters and my grandparents are all in the medical field, you can only imagine how literate and intelligent they must be. So yeah, perhaps.
That's interesting. For those who may or may not know, if you look up Bobby Conte's profile online, you're going to see he works a lot. He seems to be an almost always employed actor. However, you know and I know, Bobby, that's never the case with actors. And I'm wondering, someplace in that journey of life, if it hasn't happened already, you probably will have the experience of, I was perfect for that role and I didn't get it. Do you have any clue as to what your insight is into disappointment, rejection, not having the promise fulfilled?
Oh, it's constant. It's ever present, the disappointment. There's countless examples I could give, and then you have to give over in some aspect that things happen for a reason, which is such a sort of ridiculous mindset to be in, because that's so reliant on coincidence. It's so reliant on faith. And I've had faith sort of come in and out of my life. But if you're involved in the theater and in the live arts, you've chosen to give over to a life of faith, whether you like it or not. And so I know that if certain things had gone my way that I really wanted at the moment and at the time, I wouldn't have been available to do Company. And Company as a piece, when I was a young person, first discovering Sondheim, was a game changer and really making me think, oh, I could have a life and a passion for doing this as an adult and trying to sustain this. And so the idea of not being in Company, especially after 20 months of nothing, would sort of break my heart, no matter how wonderful all these other opportunities would have been. So you have to look at things in a roundabout way of going, well, those were meant to go by the wayside, and this therefore came about because of all of that. And now other opportunities will come about because of Company. But you could just say that about any instance you were really in. So that's how I choose to look at things, to say somewhat sane and somewhat.
That seems like a healthy perspective.
You have no control.
For our listeners and watchers, as everyone I think in the world knows at this point, the great powerhouse talent behind Company, of course, is Stephen Sondheim, who passed away recently. Again, another letter writing relationship where I was after him to talk about what his sense of the spiritual was, his sense of God, background in terms of cultural Judaism. And he was wonderful, but his letters would say, I think that as articulate as I may be on some things, I'm very inarticulate on the meaning of life and faith and spirituality. And I think you might find that I only give you short answers in an interview. I believe he was kind enough to respond. But I mention that because his loss is such a great loss in that he was a monumental talent. But as a member of the cast of this most recent celebration of his music, what's the feeling about his passing?
It still feels odd to comment on it or talk about it, because I think many of us are still trying to process it, because we're in the midst of doing previews for a Broadway musical that already sort of extends you beyond your mental bandwidth. And so when you add a profound loss on top of it, of not only our composer and writer, but for many of us, the person who carved the path for us to even see a life in this world, it's very daunting to really let that in, while simultaneously trying to honor him and do him justice every night in a very tangible way. It's very odd. So I'm still maneuvering around the emotions and the feelings. But the immediate thing that comes to mind is just the great luck and honor of getting to do that for him, and to do it through humor, and to be doing his comedy every night, to service people and uplift people's spirits, and to not wallow in that pain every night while we do the show. That's very, very lucky and a great blessing and honor. Hopefully I'll become more articulate. You're
wonderful as always. Bobby is a person who's not only in the cast, but he has a great song by Sondheim. I had to ask you the obvious question. You do take the subway?
I do take the subway.
Okay. Gives a richer power to your song. But I mention it too because I think one of the things that I love about him is we have all of us favorite songs that he authored. Is there one you came into this musical loving more than others? The New Yorker magazine had an evaluation of him, which I strongly disagree with, actually, because some of the things that the man didn't like, I love the most. Something like "Children Will Listen, Children Will Learn," obviously "Being Alive," things like that. But are there particular songs that echo in your life a great resonance?
Oh, I mean, it changes all the time
Is
because
it?
all of his music is so expansive in what it's dealing with the human condition. When I was a kid and first saw Company Being Alive was obviously the
Hmm.
first clue in. I was so knocked over by that song and by the structure, the simple structure of that song of beginning with a character that's just pontificating about what commitment must mean based off what his friends are telling him, now her. So it's someone's supposed to do this, right? Someone is like this, someone is like that, and they're very gently and kindly going, "How do you know so much about this thing if you've never been there?"
Hmm.
And the shift that happens in the middle of that song of suddenly, instead of pontificating and wondering and sort of angrily, bitingly questioning what commitment is, he suddenly starts asking for it simply by switching someone to somebody.
Hmm.
Somebody do this to me. Somebody do this to me. And it's how a slight shift in craft can make such an emotional impact, and that exists throughout all of his music and throughout all of his shows. Is the craftsmanship that if you go down the wormhole on YouTube or anywhere and hear him speak, he makes it so accessible for anyone to really understand and learn what he's doing. Not that it's not complicated, not that it's not incredibly difficult, tedious, hard work, but it's something that is very much he's able to speak about so that you can understand it. And it may go over the head of, in the moment when an audience is watching, it may go over the head of 99% of people, but it's still in service of the overall aura and storytelling that gives an audience an ability to give over to an experience for 2.5 hours, however long it may be. And when I was 14, that song was a huge clue in.
Getting momentarily spiritual here for a second. I was intrigued in reading about a Bronx Tale that around your neck was Saint Michael the Archangel. Did you pick that, or was that picked by the people who directed the play?
No, that was Bob De Niro gave me that. I think he gave necklaces to a number of cast members because he's if anything, Bob is a master of detail, of helping you immerse yourself in a world as fully as you can. So yes, he gave me that because we were portraying a very devout Catholic Italian community in 1960s Bronx. And so that was a great clue and a great generous blessing from him.
Hmm. We had on the program a couple of months ago Amanda Klutz, who, of course, talked about Nick Cordero, her wonderful husband. You had the privilege of working in close quarters with this amazingly talented man and to watch, like we all did, his battle with COVID-19. Obviously, you'd expect her to say the incredible things she said about him. She loved him so deeply. Your own experience of him, super good.
Oh, please, of course.
Mhm.
I met him as a 23-year-old, so I was at a very impressionable age, and I was quite terrified at many moments going through that process. And he was um, he saved me at many moments. He was able to put my mind at ease, to put my body at ease, to in many ways point the way as I started to maneuver what life was going to be like, not only in this industry and in this place I had envisioned and loved and always imagined and wanting to be a part of, but then how to balance that with being a fully complex individual and how those things actually service each other. They are not supposed to be isolated things. He was the sort of the gold standard and light for me to follow
Hmm.
in that sense. And so him being gone, um, you know, luckily I've had a year to process that, and
Wow.
I'm able to look at him now and look at that grief in a very loving and joyful way, and not just sort of wallow in the pain of it.
Hmm.
But it's, yes, it's still, it's hard to It's still hard to imagine that he's not here, even though he is in some sense.
Bobby Conte is our guest. Bobby, Amanda is a highly religious person with a strong spiritual view of the world and world beyond this world. Do you come from that at all yourself?
My whole mom's side of the family, the Italian side, is Catholic as well. My mom moved to California for graduate school,
Ah,
and sort of, I think again we're a very spiritual, faithful family, but she removed ourselves from sort of conventional religion or church. Growing up, we
mhm.
used to pray to the Great Spirit at dinner every day, very sort of hippy dippy. And but I had my father's not in my life, and so I've had a number of surrogate father figures. One of which was this voice teacher at this impressionable age that was really sort of pointing me the way to say you can do this if you commit yourself. And when I was in college, he passed away very suddenly.
Mm.
He was in his mid 50s. Um, and so I didn't really know where to turn. And the summer before he passed, I was doing a production of a show called The Light in the Piazza,
Mhm.
where the man who was playing my father in the show was a pastor in Ann Arbor. I went to school in University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and he had a great church there called the Green Room. And so every Sunday, when before our matinee, I would see him writing his sermons. And again, I was raised spiritual, but quite pretty agnostic in terms of conventional religion. And so he and I would have pretty in-depth conversations about what he was preaching and what he would be talking about every day. And he was very generous of spirit, and there was a lack of judgment coming from him, even though I was probably asking some pretty biting questions, and I probably wasn't as articulate as I happen to come across now. So when my voice teacher Richard passed, I reached out to Scott, and he said, "Why don't you just come to Green Room and see if it speaks to you at all?" And so I started going for a number of years, and I found it very healing and very peaceful. If anything, just to watch someone preach for an hour and a half, to just go, is pretty remarkable. Even just from an
Yes, yeah.
acting standpoint, it's just that the fact that you can hold a crowd and speak about something for an hour and a half is an amazing feat. And I found it really just about let's analyze an aspect of human behavior for an hour and a half. And yes, we're
Mhm.
going to use some scripture as examples for periods of times, but let's dig into what we're all talking about or dealing with on a daily basis in some specific sense for an hour and a half. And I found it very peaceful and moving. So I definitely see how religion can add a sense of community and comfort and love to people who are in the wallows of not knowing where to turn. Sometimes I would pontificate up to the air and I would talk to Richard. And I would get very frustrated, and someone who was at that church was like, "Yeah, but Bobby, are you listening back?" I was like,
Mhm.
"What does that mean?" They said, "You need to listen. You can't just have a one-sided
Right, right,
conversation
right.
with someone." And so so the idea of conventional religion comes in and out of my life, but I see what it has done for
Hmm.
me in a very healing sense.
Bobby, we just have a few moments left, but I wanted to ask you, in my work, every weekend I get up and in front of whether it's a large or small crowd, give a homily. And I found that at the back door church, when we were still doing the back door before COVID, that if 9 people said that was a great sermon, great homily, nice, one person could come up and say it was awful, didn't get anything out of it, thought you were way off base. And for some reason, the rest of my day, I'm going to focus on that one and not the 9, which is my way of saying, how do you handle criticism?
And another great question I'll think about for the rest of my life
Mm,
balancing. Um, you know, to go back to Company, our director, Marianne Elliott, I think is a great example of someone who, while simultaneously honoring the legacy of things that she's is putting involving herself in, whether it's one of the most iconic books in British history, which is Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, whether it's working with Tony Kushner in Angels in America, whether it's working with Stephen Sondheim in Company, and
mhm,
honoring the expectation that everyone has when you try to engage with that material, to honor that and honor the legacy and the pantheon of what you are now a part of, while
mhm,
simultaneously saying, my job is to make it palatable and relevant to an audience for today, and perhaps an audience who has never engaged with this material prior. And that's a way you can devoid yourself from the expectation of what needs to be done and that you put into your mind. I struggle with this constantly doing the show, especially with Steve Now Gone, as I think about the incredible women that have sung my song, about what this song means to New York City, let alone in the Sondheim world. And I have to go, if I go down that wormhole, there's no crawling out of it. Right. I have to go, we are doing a new thing. And that, in a way, services that lineage as much as to say, if I'm lucky enough to have a shot to be a part of that conversation, I better put my stamp on it. I better not tiptoe in with my hands up. I better take it with as much gravitas as I can and not apologize for it. And in that way, I can honor everything that's come before me. So that's I try to stay in that mindset. It's hard often to, because you can't please everybody, but that's not the point. It's to try to find, to use his words in Sunday in the Park with George, and move on. Anything you do, let it come from you, then it will be new. Give us more to see. So you have to stop worrying where you're going, move on.
Right. I want to thank Bobby Conte for being with us and Personally Speaking. You know, at the outset of this interview, Bobby said something interesting about the fact that there's no arrival point in the world of acting. It's a constant process. And one of the other things you said throughout this interview, which I liked, is when I'd ask you a question, you'd say that's something I'll be grappling with probably the rest of my life. In other words, there is no set point. There is no arrival point. There's no absolute. It's all process. And we're just hoping that your process of being an artist who shares himself with us and the public will go on forever. I hope our listeners and watchers around the world, around the country, especially if they come to New York, will embrace and celebrate company and Bobby's role in it. Bobby, thank you for talking today. We appreciate it so much. As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you have any comments or questions, you can reach me at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. To go to past episodes of this show, go to YouTube. Punch in Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. And please don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can also see past programs at personallyspeakingpodcast.buzzsprout.com or at www.closeencountertv.com or at www.ollmp.org. Personally Speaking is also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. And we're also now on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and ask others to share also in being part of our Personally Speaking family. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.